Hey guys, it's Justine here from I Should Read That, and today I am bringing you a review of The Devil in the Dark Water by Stuart Turton. So in, I think it was 2017 or 2018, Stuart Turton's debut novel, The 7 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, or The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle if you're in the US, hit shelves and was a big smash hit. And one of the reasons for that is it is a very weird book. It is bizarre, it is strange, it is genre defying. Is it a sci-fi novel? Is it a crime novel? Is it literary fiction? What the hell is going on? So I think if you are anything like me and you read that first book, you're wondering how he's going to possibly follow up a book that incredibly unique. And so that is sort of why I was so interested initially in The Devil in the Dark Water before knowing anything about it. And then once I finally got my hands on the synopsis, I was very intrigued because it sounded like a book I would love anyway, regardless of this author's previous books. So usually when I do book reviews, I try to not reference other books and compare them because that just doesn't really seem very fair. However, in this case, I think that it's going to be really difficult to avoid comparing this book to Evelyn Hardcastle. So I'm going to try to stick to this one as much as possible, but there may be a little bit of crossover. Now, before I jump into my review of The Devil in the Dark Water, I just really quickly want to have the disclaimer that I was indeed sent a proof copy of this book, this is not the final cover, for review by the publisher. That does not impact my opinion on the book whatsoever. Also, I'm going to do my best to keep this spoiler-free because this is a weird book, another kind of weird, twisty book. If you want to go in knowing absolutely nothing, you probably shouldn't be watching any review videos anyway, so I would suggest if you want to know nothing about this, go in knowing literally nothing about it. Just don't watch this. Come back later after you've read it. So this book is set in the 1600s in a city called Batavia, which I believe is in Indonesia, and our characters are boarding a sort of East India Company ship in order to go back to Amsterdam. Now there is quite the collection of characters who are boarding this ship, namely sort of the world's most famous detective, very much a Sherlock Holmes type named Samuel Pepys, is in chains. He is being brought back to Amsterdam for trial. We don't know what he's been sort of arrested for. Even he doesn't know. So there's him and his bodyguard Hayes, and they are boarding the ship, as well as the Governor General of Batavia and his wife Sarah, and a whole collection of other people. As they are getting ready to depart, a man who turns out to be a leper basically pops up and declares that this ship is in danger. He and his master have put like a curse on it. It's not going to make it to Amsterdam. Everyone is gonna die. And then he spontaneously bursts into flames. So this is obviously a very mysterious event that serves as the catalyst for the rest of the plot. So Hayes, the bodyguard, and Sarah, the wife of the Governor General, have to figure out whether or not there is a demon on the ship, if this ship is in danger, or if it's kind of all in their heads. And this book does a really marvelous job of combining the supernatural with historical fiction. I can't speak to how accurate kind of the language is, or you know, the sort of historical aspects of this book are, because I don't know anything about 16th century Amsterdam, but I thought that it was a really fun crime mystery novel that has a really fantastic supernatural element to it, and that is obviously something that really draws me in. So I think the most important thing to say about this book is if you are looking for the 7 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle 2.0, you're not gonna get it from this. This is a completely separate book, a completely separate setting. They're in no way connected. But also, this book, I think, takes the best aspects of Evelyn Hardcastle, the kind of weirdness, the twistiness, and makes it a little bit more accessible. I really enjoyed Evelyn Hardcastle. I think it was a 4-star read for me, but I did often find myself quite lost while reading that book. It's so bizarre. You have this one character literally jumping backwards and forwards in time into different people's bodies, and it's mad. This one was a little bit more straightforward, but it did have that kind of signature weirdness that I think he is going to become very well known for. So if you found yourself being kind of confused, if you couldn't follow that first book and you want to give this a try, I think that this might be a little bit better suited. Where I think it's much harder to place a book like Evelyn Hardcastle into a genre. That's kind of the point of it, I think. This is definitely a crime novel. It's a crime novel with other elements attached, and it does play with a lot of different genres and tropes. So similar to Evelyn Hardcastle, this is very much a sort of closed room mystery, whereas that kind of takes place in this crumbling country manor. This takes place on a ship. There's really nowhere to go when you're on a ship. So in that way, it sort of plays with Agatha Christie and her typical settings, which I know is a big influence for him for that first book. But also we play a little bit with Sherlock Holmes, where we have the Sherlock character locked up and essentially Watson has to investigate, and he kind of gets his own Watson. And it sort of plays with a lot of those things, which I really enjoyed. I thought he did a really fantastic job of combining all of those things to create something unique and new. This book is incredibly difficult to put down. I probably could have read this in one sitting if I had the time. Tragically, I did not, so I read it over maybe 3 sittings, but it just absolutely flew by. And I think it's the accessibility of his writing. He does a really fantastic job with that, and the tension that he threads throughout the book. I mean, the inciting incident in this book happens like 20 pages in, and it's sort of full steam ahead from there. I thought that the way that he threads that tension through, you get Hayes and Sarah's points of view, but you also briefly get the point of view of, say, the captain of the ship, from the sailors, sort of as this tension is rising, doing kind of my favorite thing from horror movies, where you don't know who to trust, you don't know if someone is being possessed, you don't know if, you know, you should sort of fall in line with this supposed demon. It's so good, and it's really well done. This is a book that you can just absolutely devour. Regarding the characters in this book, as I say, we have a lot of different points of view throughout this novel, but really our main characters are Hayes and Sarah. So starting with Hayes, he is my favorite. I really loved him because he takes that kind of massive, scary bodyguard type character, and he's really just a big teddy bear. I really loved him. I thought he was a really fascinating and complicated character. So basically, he is a former soldier. He has sort of a dark past, and he becomes friends with this man, Pips, 5 years prior, and he basically becomes his bodyguard. I think at one point in the book he says something like, you know, it's Pips's job to solve the mysteries, and it's his job to, like, punch someone in the face before they run away, before they can be arrested. And he is very much this kind of like, he sees himself as all brawn and no brains, but Pips obviously sees something in him and tries to let him investigate and encourage him to investigate, but Hayes just won't do it for various reasons. And he has to kind of come into his own as a character in this book because he can't rely on his friend to solve this mystery and save all of their lives. He has to do it himself, and I thought that that was incredibly well done. I loved him. I thought he was a wonderful character. I am always going to love the kind of big teddy bear terrifying type characters. they just always make me really happy, and I thought he was very well done. Then we have Sarah, and I'm really surprised that I liked her as much as I did, because I feel like she very much falls into the sort of trap of being a woman in a historical fiction novel who's, you know, very modern. You know, she's very independent, she's very fiery, and she is constantly disobeying her husband, and, you know, she wants to be free and, you know, allow her daughter to be free and all of this. But I thought that he wrote her very well, and while she wasn't like my #1 character in this book, I did really enjoy her. So she's been married to the Governor General for I think like 15 years, and he is horrible. She hates him. Their marriage is very strained because she disobeys him. She wants to be independent. She wants to kind of have her own life, but he wants a wife who's very much falls in line with social standards at the time. So they kind of butt heads a lot with that, and I'll talk about content warnings later. I'll put them in the description, but there is descriptions of spousal abuse in this book. It doesn't happen on the page, it happens prior to the book starting, but it's very much there. And despite all of the hardships that she has in her life, and despite the fact that she is in a very privileged position, she does a really wonderful job of trying to do what's right for her daughter and for her family, but also trying to live her own life and be independent of her horrible husband. And she finally gets the chance amidst this, horrible situation. She finally gets the chance to have some kind of freedom. And I thought that was really, really interesting, and it was a really fascinating take on that very kind of tropey female character. I really, really enjoyed The Devil in the Dark Water. I thought it was a fantastic book. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. And I think that if you are someone who has read his previous book, it might be a good idea to kind of eliminate your expectations of what you're gonna get before going into this, because as I said before, if you're looking for Evelyn Hardcastle 2, you're not gonna get it. This is very much his own story, and I found that he did a really good job of kind of bringing out the best in Evelyn Hardcastle and turning it into something that was a little bit more accessible. Just before I finish up, a couple of content warnings. I'll put these down below if you're interested as well. As I said, descriptions of spousal abuse, and then there's also some vague threats of rape, and also there is a sequence with animal death in it. It's very brief, but I think that if you're someone who's very affected by that, that might be something that you want to have a little heads up for before we get started. So just really quickly, before I finish up, some content warnings for this book. As I mentioned, there is descriptions of spousal abuse. It doesn't happen on page, it's mentioned as something that has happened in the past. There is some kind of vague threats of rape, and there is a sequence where there is quite graphic animal death. It's very, very brief, but if that's something that you're really affected by, I would want to give you a heads up before you dove in. So that is it for my review of The Devil and the Dark Water. I would highly, highly recommend it for anyone who's looking for a kind of historical novel, a really cracking good mystery, or something that has those kinds of paranormal elements to it. I think the best way for me to sum it up would be to steal a phrase from my mother. It is absolutely a thumping good read, and I highly recommend it for the upcoming chilly months. I would love to know in the comments below if you have read this book, if you've read his previous book, if it's in your TBR, definitely give me a shout. I would love to chat about it. I post bookish content to this channel fairly frequently, so go ahead and hit subscribe, check back soon, and I will see you next time.